Have you ever felt like you're constantly playing catch-up in a world where others command attention without even trying? You enter a conversation, and suddenly, someone twists your words with a charming smile. Or you begin doubting your own instincts, well, without them ever raising their voice. It's unsettling, isn't it? But here's the truth. That's not luck. That's not charisma. That's calculated power. Most people live on autopilot. They react too quickly, speak too much, and expose their vulnerabilities before they even realize a psychological game is being played. In doing so, they surrender control before the real conversation begins. But you have the chance to be different. There's a rare and potent kind of power. It doesn't scream for attention or seek applause. It lives in stillness. It thrives in clarity. It's born from restraint. Imagine being able to read a person's true intention before they speak, to sense the shift in energy before anyone else does, to influence a room without needing to dominate it. Sounds unreal. It's not. This is not about deception. It's about self-mastery, about becoming so grounded that no one can knock you off balance. It's about observing, listening, and choosing your responses with purpose. This quiet strength isn't flashy, but it's incredibly effective and timeless. These are not tricks. These are rules encarned in the enduring philosophy of Stoicism. They are simple, powerful, and transformative. Once you understand them, you'll stop reacting and start commanding. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop being played and start shaping the game? Imagine being in the middle of a heated discussion. Voices rise, tempers flare, words turn frantic. What you're witnessing isn't dominance, it's a loss of control. When someone's tone escalates and their emotions take over, they haven't gained power, they've surrendered it. In every room, every disagreement, every negotiation, the person who holds their ground with calm presence is the one truly in command. Why? Because while others spiral into chaos, they remain centered. In that quiet control, that's real stoic strength. Emotions are not your enemies, but they are not your compass either. They're passing clouds, not permanent truths. A stoic doesn't deny their emotions, but they don't serve them either. They observe them with clarity, respond with purpose, and never let them dictate their course. Think about this. The man who lets anger steer his decisions is easily manipulated. He reacts to every jab, every insult, every provocation. It's not leading, he's being led. Like a puppet pulled by invisible strings, he gives his power to everyone who knows which buttons to press. You might think shouting back makes you strong, but in that moment, you've already lost. You've allowed someone else to control your inner state. That's not power, that's surrender, disguised as passion. True mastery isn't about suppressing your emotions, it's about commanding them. It's about recognizing when you're triggered, breathing through the storm, and responding with discipline, not impulse. That's what Stoicism teaches. Not emotional emptiness, but emotional sovereignty. The strongest man in the room is rarely the loudest. He's the one who stays still when others shake, who chooses silence when provoked, and whose mind remains unmoved amidst the noise. That's not weakness, it's the most disciplined form of strength. He waits. He observes. He listens not with the intent to respond, but to understand. He doesn't flinch at insults or bite back in anger. Why? Because he sees every provocation as a test, every insult as a mirror of the other person's lack of control. Anger to him is not a tool, it's a trap, and silence. That's where real power resides. Picture this. You're standing face to face with someone who's trying to provoke you. Their voice rises, their body shifts. They want a reaction. But your pulse stays steady. Your eyes remain focused. Don't interrupt. You don't match their chaos. Instead, you offer a calm smile and say very little. You let their storm rage while you remain grounded. Unshaken. That is true control. Some say that showing emotion is what makes you human, and they're not wrong. Emotion is connection. But what they forget is this. Uncontrolled emotion makes you vulnerable. It exposes your inner state to anyone watching. It gives people the blueprint to manipulate you. In the wrong hands, your emotional reactions become weapons used against you. A man who reveals everything he feels is easy to read and easy to control. He's an open book, and anyone can flip the pages. But the Stoic understands restraint, not because he's cold or distant, but because he knows the value of preserving his center. He reveals his emotions on his terms, not theirs. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself often, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." This isn't poetry, it's preparation. It's a way of seeing the world, because the world will provoke you. It will test your peace. It will push your buttons to see what leaks out. And if you haven't trained yourself, you'll respond on instinct, not wisdom. Emotional control doesn't mean suppression. It means strategy. It means knowing when to reveal and when to hold back. It means using silence as a message and presence as a shield. The most dangerous man isn't the one who shouts it, the one who watches and chooses when to act. Strength of stoicism. That's the mastery of self. The man who chooses when and how to speak holds far more power than the one who tries to dominate a room with noise. Picture this. Someone insults you in public. Everyone holds their breath, expecting a reaction. But instead of lashing out, you pause. You meet their eyes with calm, maybe give a small nod, and then turn away. That silence, it echoes longer than any angry retort ever could. That moment, the crowd is no longer focused on the insult, they're captivated by your composure. The aggressor stands alone, disarmed by your refusal to step into their arena. You didn't fight for control. You claimed it without raising a voice. It's how true influence works. Quiet, intentional, immovable. Power doesn't always come from speaking louder. It often comes from setting the frame. And the frame is everything. If you're constantly reacting, then someone else is running the show. They get to decide what triggers you, what consumes your energy, what shapes your thoughts. But when you stay grounded, when your emotions are governed, not unleashed, you flip the script. You define the environment. You set the pace. Here's the harsh truth. Most people are enslaved by emotional reflex. A sarcastic jab makes them defensive. The passive-aggressive tone sparks their temper. An unanswered message fuels their anxiety. They believe they're thinking, but they're just reacting. They've handed over their internal world to external circumstances. But the Stoic doesn't play that game. They train themselves to notice the spark before it becomes a fire. They don't get pulled into battles that don't matter. They recognize that attention is energy and they spend it wisely. They understand that silence can speak louder than words, and that detachment is not apathy, it's awareness paired with intention. To master yourself is to master the frame. It's to step outside the chaos and ask, is this worth my peace? Most often it isn't. And that simple pause, that space between stimulus and response, becomes your greatest weapon. Time you're tested. Remember this. True strength isn't about control over others. It's about control over yourself, and that is the highest form of Stoic power. When someone tries to provoke you through sarcasm, raised tones, or calculated pressure, they're not simply expressing themselves. They're testing you. They want to see if you'll break, if you'll bite. But the moment you react out of impulse, they've already won. You've handed them your power without realizing it. Now imagine a different outcome. Imagine you remain unmoved. While they throw emotional arrows, you stand like a seasoned general watching, analyzing, conserving your energy for what truly matters. Your tone stays even, your gaze steady. You don't flinch, you don't rise. And when you finally speak, your words are few, but they land with weight and precision. It's not passivity, that's control with purpose. This is the art of restraint, a discipline few master, but everyone notices. When you choose silence over chaos, presence over panic, and calm over ego, you shift the dynamic instantly. The one who was trying to shake you becomes unsettled. The crowd, if there is one, leans in not for volume, but for your centered presence. Your quiet becomes the loudest voice in the room. Stoicism doesn't teach us to suppress ourselves. It teaches us to refine ourselves. You don't have to engage every confrontation. In fact, the wisest strategy often involves choosing not to. Every reaction costs something: your time, your energy, your peace. So ask yourself in that critical moment, is this worthy of me? Or is it just bait dressed as urgency? True. Power often comes from what you don't say. It's felt in the silence that follows a calm glance. It's in the pause before you respond, or the decision not to respond at all. Because when you act only with purpose, people notice. And even if they don't say it out loud, they respect it. Deep down, everyone recognizes composure as the mark of depth, wisdom, and experience. So the next time you're pulled into someone else's emotional storm, anchor yourself. Let them chase your silence. Let your discipline be louder than their noise. That is stoic power, not loud, not aggressive, but deeply unshakable. Silence makes people uncomfortable. Most will do anything to avoid it, fill the space with noise, jokes, distractions, anything to escape that eerie pause where uncertainty lives. But in that very space, the Stoic sees opportunity. Stay quiet. Something fascinating happens. Others begin to project. They guess what you're thinking. They fill in the blanks with their own insecurities, hopes, and assumptions. Your stillness becomes a mirror, and in their rush to escape it, they reveal far more than they intended.
Ow.
This is where true leverage begins, not by force, not by argument, but by mastering the art of restraint. The Stoic doesn't speak to be heard. He doesn't interrupt to defend his pride. He doesn't react to fill the air, observes. He listens not just to the words spoken, but to what's hidden. Beneath them, fear, insecurity, need. All of it comes pouring out if you give it the space. And then when he chooses to speak, his words are sharp not because they are cruel, but because they are precise. They're not diluted by over-explanation or emotional noise. They land with weight, not volume. There's an old tale of a Roman general who attended a tense meeting with his enemies. Throughout the long session, he sat in silence, watching. His enemies took it as hesitation, weakness even. But when he finally spoke, it was one sentence, one line, and it changed the outcome entirely. That's the power of strategic silence. Most people believe dominance is loud, that control is aggressive. But the Stoic understands that real power often feels like still water, calm on the surface, yet deeply unshakable underneath. In every negotiation, every disagreement, every conversation, your silence can be a tool. Not to intimidate, but to gain clarity, to draw others out. To position yourself in strength without needing to declare it. So the next time the room goes quiet, don't rush to fill it. Let the silence work for you. Let it make others uneasy. Let them speak more than they meant to. And when you finally respond, make it count. That's stoicism in action, not a void, but a force. This is how you command without demanding, how you lead without shouting. Through the power of intentional quiet, in negotiation, the most powerful man often says the least. His silence is not avoidance, his strategy. While others rush to fill the room with offers, justifications, and nervous chatter, he sits anchored, grounded, watching, waiting, not with fear, but with patience. And when he finally speaks, his words are clear, measured, and undeniable. His restraint becomes his influence. His discipline becomes persuasion. Power doesn't always show up as the loudest voice or the most aggressive pitch. In fact, it's often the man who speaks with control, who resists the need to impress, who leads the conversation by simply not chasing it. That's the paradox of Stoic power. It's the calm man who often moves the room. Outside of high-pressure moments, this principle still holds. In a business meeting, a well-timed pause after a question can show that you're considering the answer, not scrambling for it. In a job interview, a moment of silence signals confidence, not confusion. And in everyday conversations, the man who listens more than he speaks tends to be valued more. Why? Because he's not desperate to be liked. He's not trying to win approval. His value comes from within, not from the validation of others. Silence becomes sacred in this way. It reveals sufficiency. When you no longer feel the need to comment on everything, when you don't react to every glance or every word, others notice. Your restraint signals strength. People become more attentive when you speak, because your words are not given lightly. They carry weight. Think about it. When someone always has something to say, we tune them out. But when someone speaks rarely, we lean in, not because they demand it, but because they've earned it. Their quiet has created gravity. So in your next conversation, resist the urge to fill every gap. Let the silence stretch. Let it make others curious. Let it reflect your inner steadiness. And when you finally speak, let it count. Because the man who can master his silence can master any room. Let them guess. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them lean in, searching for a glimpse of your mind. Because what is rare becomes revered in silence. When wielded intentionally, becomes a rare and formidable power. In a world that craves instant expression, silence draws attention, creates contrast. Like negative space in art, it gives your presence shape, your words substance. Without it, speech becomes noise, just more chatter in the storm. But with it, even a single sentence can feel like thunder. One well-placed phrase can shift the energy of an entire room. The Stoic doesn't strive to be silent, but to be measured. To understand that timing is as important as a message. That a word delivered too soon is lost, but a word delivered with precision is unforgettable. When you've held your silence like a sharpened blade and sheathed only when it matters, your words strike with clarity and force. So train yourself. Become comfortable in the quiet. Let others stumble over their urgency to be heard. Let them fill the space with their noise, their nervous explanations, their need to be validated. You stand still, calm, present, unmoved. That stillness speaks volumes. It announces that you are not desperate to prove yourself, that you are grounded in something deeper than approval. And when you do speak, make it count. Speak like every word was chosen in battle. Speak with the intent not to impress, but to impact. Because words spoken from stillness are heard differently. They carry the weight of reflection, discipline, and conviction. This isn't just conversation, it's composure in action. It's the embodiment of dominance without aggression. It's a kind of strength that commands, not convinces. That influence is not by volume, but by presence. Master silence, and you'll find you no longer need to chase respect. It will be drawn to you. People will listen, not because you demand it, but because your restraint makes your voice rare. And what is rare is always valuable. This is the Stoic's advantage. Calm as strategy, stillness as strength. Some people speak as if they're opening a window into their soul. Every sentence they utter reveals what they believe, what they fear, and where they stand. There's a kind of raw honesty in that, but also a vulnerability. Because the more predictable you are, the easier it becomes to outmaneuver you. The Stoic sees things differently. Power often lies not in what is shown, but in what is held back. Not every thought deserves to be spoken. Not every truth must be declared. Silence, when chosen deliberately, becomes a cloak of strength. A way to let the world reveal itself while you remain a mystery. You don't need to impress anyone. You don't need to constantly prove your worth, intelligence, or strength. That desperation to be validated, it's a trap. Instead, remain composed. While others pour themselves out trying to dominate attention, you conserve your energy. You watch, you listen, you remember. Let them misjudge you. Let them assume you're slow, naive, or uninterested. Let them think you're uninformed. That illusion becomes your greatest disguise. It softens their guard. They begin to speak freely, thinking they've already won. And in that ease, they reveal more than they intended. Not because you forced them to, but because you allowed them to feel in control. This is the brilliance of restraint. You gather more by giving away nothing. You learn by observing, not by interrupting. And when the time finally comes to act, you do so with precision, not desperation. Your moves are deliberate. Your timing is sharp. Your presence undeniable. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He's once reminded himself. It is not necessary to show all you think. There is power in stillness. There is advantage in being underestimated. There is wisdom in letting others speak first, so you can speak last with clarity and force. So let them talk. Let them show their hand. While they reveal themselves, you gather insight. And when the moment is right, you act not loudly, but effectively. That is the Stoic's edge, unseen, unshaken, unstoppable. The average person plays life in straight lines. What they feel is what they show. What they think is what they say. There's no filter, no delay, just raw, immediate expression. But you are not average. You are deliberate. You are intentional. Where others rush to speak, you pause. Where they react emotionally, you remain composed. You give just enough to keep others guessing, never enough to be truly seen. Because full transparency, though praised in society, can also leave you exposed. And in the wrong hands, being known becomes a weakness. Now imagine this. A quiet man walks into a room full of noise. He doesn't interrupt. He listens. He nods. His calm is disarming. People begin to speak more freely around him, believing he is passive or indifferent. But what they don't realize is he is absorbing everything. Every word, every gesture, every glance. He is building a map in his mind, storing information for when it matters most. Then, when the moment arrives, he speaks. Not loudly, but clearly. Not often, but with precision. And in that moment, the entire room turns to listen. It's not because he demanded attention, but because his silence earned it. This is the Stoic's art of strategic restraint. You may agree with someone outwardly, but reserve judgment until you've gathered enough insight. You may appear indifferent, yet inside you are calculating, processing, refining. This isn't deceit, this is discipline. There's a difference between misleading and withholding in the latter is wisdom in action. With uncertainty. But your silence is not lack of opinion, it's a sign of strength. You wait for clarity before commitment. You act only when necessary. And by being misunderstood intentionally, you become untouchable. So let others race to reveal themselves. You remain still. Let them think they've figured you out. You know the truth, that restraint is not weakness, it is mastery. That mystery, when forged in calm intention, becomes your shield. This is how the Stoic moves, with quiet confidence, precise action, and the discipline to never play all his cards at once. You don't always need to be seen to be powerful. Sometimes the greatest strength is the one that remains hidden till the moment calls for it. This isn't manipulation. This is mastery of presence. In a world obsessed with speed, noise, and instant validation, the Stoic plays the long game. He is willing to be underestimated, even ignored. Why? Because he understands that timing is everything. When you reveal your strength too soon, you give others the chance to resist. When you strike from silence, from stillness, you catch the world off guard. Patience, then, is not passivity. It is preparation. While others scramble for attention and clamor to prove their worth, you remain grounded. You do not chase recognition because you are building something deeper: command. Without effort, influence without noise. You wait for the moment when your presence alone changes the tone of the room. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them build their conclusions about who you are, what you can do, and where you stand. Because the more certain they become, the more vulnerable they are when they're wrong. And that's your leverage. Not deception, but discretion. Not absence of power, but control of exposure. Think about the warrior who walks into a battlefield with no armor, no weapons visible. The enemy laughs. But when the warrior moves, his strike is swift, unexpected, precise. That is you. You've trained in the shadows, cultivated depth and silence. And now, when the time is right, you step forward with force that no one prepared for. The Stoic does not need to dominate every moment. He needs only to be unreadable. Matters. And when it matters, he is undeniable. So next time you're tempted to prove yourself, to interrupt, to demand to be seen, pause. Ask yourself, what if I already have the advantage? You likely do, because true power often lies. Not in presence, but in its restraint. Not in what is said, but in what is held back. And when silence finally breaks, make sure it roars. Some people fear silence, not because it's uncomfortable, but because they fear being forgotten, so they overextend. They overexpose. They show up in every space, Say something in every conversation and try to be seen in every moment. But what they don't realize is this: constant presence creates predictability. And in the world of influence, predictability is weakness. The Stoic doesn't aim to be everywhere. He doesn't chase visibility. He understands the paradox sometimes. The less they see you, the more they feel you. Your absence, when intentional, creates mystery. And mystery, when paired with discipline, becomes power. It causes others to ask questions they wouldn't. Ask if you were always available. Where is he? What's he thinking? Why isn't he here? That quiet void becomes your greatest amplifier and the beauty. You don't have to say a word. Your restraint does the talking. Your choice to disengage makes others engage more deeply. When you offer less, people imagine more. They project significance into your silence. Not because you demanded respect, but because you allowed them to wonder. Think of the rare gem locked behind glass people. Don't touch it, yet they admire it more. Why? Because it's limited, scarce, preserved. You too must treat your presence with care. Don't spend your energy explaining every choice, defending every move, or chasing every opportunity. Selectiveness is strategy. Detachment is strength. When you stop being overly available, you start being truly valued. Because in a world where everyone is constantly online, constantly talking, is constantly trying to be relevant, the man who knows when to disappear stands out. He becomes the one worth waiting for. It's the one they don't forget, because his silence is louder than their noise. Let others scramble for attention. You master the art of absence, not to escape, but to elevate, to command presence, even when you're not in the room, because that's the Stoic edge. Presence by principle, not performance. You've stopped chasing attention. You no longer crave to be seen by everyone. You've stepped back, not out of fear, but out of clarity. And in doing so, you've become rare. You've become sacred. Because what is rare becomes respected. Scarcity, when intentional, is not weakness. It's a message. It says, I choose where I give my time, my energy, and my voice. And that choice teaches others how to treat you. When your availability is unlimited, people start to assume your time has no value. They delay, cancel, and overstep because you've silently shown them that there is no cost to doing so. But the moment you begin to set boundaries, real boundaries, everything changes. You don't respond immediately to every message. You don't show up to every event. You no longer say yes by default. And suddenly, people notice. They pause before asking for your time. They prepare more thoroughly. They measure their words more carefully. Why? Because they understand. Your presence is earned, not assumed. Even in conversation, this principle holds. The man who speaks with restraint commands more respect than the man who speaks endlessly. His words are deliberate, rare, intentional, and that rarity forces others to lean in, to remember, because they weren't bombarded. They were gifted something meaningful. This is scarcity in motion, power in pause, influence in absence. You don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes saying less allows you to speak louder. Sometimes not showing up makes your presence more powerful. Elite circles understand this well. Access is limited, time is protected, presence is curated. Not to exclude, but to preserve value. The Stoic embraces this same mindset. He doesn't give all of himself to the world. He gives only what's aligned with purpose. So step back not to disappear, but to elevate. Speak less not to retreat, but to be remembered. And when you give your presence, let it mean something. Because when everything is accessible, nothing is appreciated. But when you become rare, you become unforgettable. Be someone whose time is sacred. Someone whose focus is sharp, undistracted, and unavailable for sale. When people realize you no longer operate on their timeline, when they see that your world doesn't pause just to please them, they begin to respond differently. They stop assuming they can always reach you. They stop expecting you to chase them. Instead, they begin to earn your attention. This is where your power begins, in the choice to move deliberately, to not show up out of obligation, but from intention. You no longer run toward every open door. You don't accept every invitation just to stay visible. You walk slowly, calmly, with purpose toward what aligns with your highest values. That shift alone reclaims your energy, restores your self-respect. And it reminds the world that your presence isn't a commodity, it's a gift. Others will race to be everywhere, to speak louder, to post more, to show up even when they have nothing of substance to say. Let them. Their noise is not your responsibility. Their exhaustion is not your problem. Your strength lies in stillness, in selectivity. You've chosen depth over display, clarity over chaos. And when you finally move, when you act, when you speak, when you show up, it matters. Because it's rare. Because people know you didn't do it for attention. You did it with clarity, purpose, and unshakable calm. This is the paradox of being rare. You're not forgotten. You're remembered more deeply, not by everyone, but by the right ones, those who resonate with your values. Those who see the depth in your silence and the force in your restraint. You've stopped diluting your presence. You've begun refining it. Let this remind you, you don't need to be seen by the masses. You only need to be unforgettable too. The few who truly matter. Now that you've mastered the power of intentional scarcity, you're ready to uncover the next step. Leading quietly through reflection, not reaction. You don't have to overpower someone to win their respect. You don't need to be the loudest, the smartest, or the most dominant voice in the room. True influence, the kind that lasts, begins with one powerful, often overlooked act: making someone feel understood. When a person feels seen, they let their guard down. The tension in their shoulders fades. The resistance in their tones softens. Suddenly, they're no longer defending themselves. They're opening up. That's the moment. That's the space where connection begins and ego fades. And in that quiet gap, you don't just win arguments, you win minds. The Stoic doesn't walk into conversations trying to prove something. He walks in present, aware. He observes, first, how someone holds their body, the cadence of their speech, their emotional rhythm. Is their energy high and chaotic, or low and withdrawn? Are they sharp with their words or cautious and slow? Then, the Stoic aligns, not to manipulate, but to mirror in a way that makes the other feel safe. It's not mimicry, but a refined calibration, a gentle shift in tone, a softening of posture, a slower pace to match theirs. Just enough for the other person to think, this person gets me. That feeling unlocks what no amount of logic or force ever could. Because here's the truth. Everyone wants to be understood. They may not admit it. They may not even realize it consciously. But it's there. And if you show up too sharp, too fast, too polished to trigger their defenses, they'll retreat. They'll resist. Not because of what you said, but because of how you said it. It's not out of weakness, but out of strength. You meet them where they are, so you can bring them somewhere deeper. That's the quiet superpower of the Stoic. Subtle alignment that earns trust without asking for it. In the end, it's not about debate. It's about resonance. It's not about impressing them. It's about reflecting them just enough to help them feel safe enough to listen. Without saying a word, you shift the tempo. Your breathing slows. Your speech softens. You offer one thoughtful question, not to win, but to guide. And if the other person begins to mirror you in their pace, their posture, their tone, you know they've entered your calm. If they don't, you don't push. You simply stay rooted, present, steady. This isn't performance. This is Stoic strategy, cloaked in composure. It's the art of leading without commanding. Even in conflict, especially in conflict, this is your quiet shield. When someone storms, inagitated, loud, ready to ignite a verbal war, you meet their fire just long enough to show them you're not afraid. You acknowledge their energy. Then, slowly, you lower yours. You breathe. You speak with intention. And something surprising happens. They begin to follow. Not because you dominated, but because you became the steadier flame. You de-escalated. The moment, by anchoring your energy, not reacting to theirs, you stepped into their storm, not to fight it, but to calm it. This is what mastery looks like. The ability to influence without imposition. Even in persuasion, this principle applies. You may have the most rational point, the best data, the clearest logic, but if your delivery is frantic, anxious, or overpowering, the message won't land. People don't just respond to what is said. They respond to the space you hold while saying it. If that space feels safe, grounded, and unshaken, they trust it. Think of a Stoic not as someone who retreats from confrontation, but as someone who brings clarity into it. He doesn't need to match chaos with chaos. He brings the room back to center, often without being noticed. His calm becomes contagious. So next time emotions rise, yours or theirs, remember, you have the ability to guide the energy, not be consumed by it. You don't win by overpowering, you lead by anchoring. And in that stillness, you earn something greater than control. You earn trust. You don't guide people through control. You lead them through clarity, calm, and connection. Influence is not about being the loudest in the room. It's about creating a space where others feel safe, seen, and steady. That space becomes magnetic. And once people feel it, they naturally lean in. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. Here's the deeper truth. People may forget what you said, but they never forget how they felt around you. Your tone, your posture, your presence, these linger longer than any clever argument. That's why the Stoic doesn't obsess over having the perfect words. He focuses on having the right energy, grounded, patient, open. Mirroring, then, isn't about flattery. It's not about manipulation. It's about alignment. When you match someone's rhythm gently, respectfully, you create resonance. When someone feels in sync with you, even if they can't explain why, they trust you. They follow you. Not because you pushed them, but because you stood still while everything else was in motion. That's when leadership becomes effortless. That's when you no longer need to convince anyone. You simply show up in quiet authority, and others choose to walk with you. They see your restraint and mistake it for strength, which, in truth, it is. The Stoic doesn't seek the spotlight. He doesn't need titles or external validation. He shapes the room without declaring ownership of it. He speaks less, but says more. He offers fewer answers, but asks better questions. And in doing so, he becomes the one others lean toward in silence. So the next time you enter a conversation, resist the urge to rush. Don't chase the stage. Don't dominate the air. Watch. Listen. Reflect. And when the moment is right, guide. Gently. Powerfully. Stoically. Because real influence isn't loud. It's felt.